Good morning. Good to be with you and your listeners today.
Well, we appreciate the chance to talk with you, especially one-on-one. I'm sure everybody wants a piece of attention today.
Yes, that's true.
All right, so we were just doing the news story, and, it says basically everybody's pointing fingers. Give us your side of this, or what you think really happened. Was there a deal in place before the session?
Well, there was certainly a proposal made by the Speaker, and I wrote the call to accommodate every element in his proposal, every revenue measure and every so-called budget reform measure, and made the call exactly to his liking, and still got no revenue bills out of the House to fix the cliff. And by the way, that's exactly what happened in the fiscal session last year as well, when we should have taken care of this. Is not a single bill to fix the cliff made it out of the House over to the Senate. And it's unfortunate because we are now going to cause parents and students to wonder, for example, whether higher ed is going to be funded, whether their top scholarships are going to be funded, and if so, in what amount. And we should have taken care of that. It just shouldn't still be up in the air. And not just TOPS in higher ed, but across state government, with our partner hospitals, with Medicaid services, our ability to pay for inmates to be housed in local sheriff's jails, and just everything that we do. And one of the things that I think people don't understand is $1 billion in state general fund, if that's the shortfall, and it is, can only be cut from about $3.4 billion that is discretionary.
Right. The
only two big pots of money there are higher ed and health care, precisely the two areas that people all across the state of Louisiana tell me every day that they don't want to see cuts. But that's the only options that we have, and which is why I don't believe that the legislature will be able to pass a budget that has once the federal reform dollars are there, to be about $692 million less than the current year. I just don't think they can do it, and I know they can't do it and responsibly and adequately fund our critical priorities.
I want to ask you, Governor, what is going to be different? We're hearing that a second special session will be called after the regular session, which I know the regular session is supposed to go into June, so we imagine maybe it would end a little bit early. What's going to be different then than now? Why should we hope that there's going to be a deal then when lawmakers couldn't make it happen now?
Well, because you're that much closer to the start of the new fiscal year, and unlike the federal government, we can't do continuing resolutions. We're either going to have a budget in place with expenditure authority in it for various state agencies and higher ed and everything else starting July 1st, or we don't. So the sense of urgency increases the closer you get to July 1st. Now, it shouldn't take that. We should have already fixed it. Now, one of the things that you said, I have asked the Speaker and the President to look at adjourning sine die, the regular session, early, so that we can have a special session that concludes no later than the designated adjournment date for the regular session. So that would be June 4th. That way there's no additional cost.
Right.
To the special session, but also we finish our business almost a month ahead of the start of the new fiscal year, so that people across the state of Louisiana, higher ed, parents, kids, but every state agency will know what the situation is going to be with their budget, with almost a month left to go in this fiscal year and before that new budget year starts.
So two things that we've heard is, one, that the Republicans did it on purpose, and the other thing we heard was that it wouldn't have mattered because you didn't really have the support you thought you had. Any truth to either of those? Do you think Republicans did it on purpose?
Well, there were some Republicans who did it on purpose, and that comes from Republican speeches on the House floor this past Friday. They would go into meetings, and the conversation of the meetings wasn't fixing our problems. It was how to prevent me from being able to get tax reform and deliver a sound budget, a stable budget, in order to try to impact me politically. Now, that certainly motivates a number of the Republicans in the House. I don't think it's a majority, but it's enough to cause problems. Look, I wrote the call that the Speaker asked for. He committed to raising a significant amount of revenue, and in fact, $572 million was what he wanted to raise to put with the $302 that comes from the federal reforms. Now, he backed away from his own proposals on the very first day, and that is what caused the session to go into a tailspin, and it never recovered. From my perspective, I don't believe there was ever a lack of support from me from any sizable part of the Democrats in the House. Now, they had some concerns about the bills being tied to other bills, and they were trying to work through that. But at the end of the day, I gave the Speaker of the House the call he asked for and got no revenue out of it. And so it was a total failure on the part of the House, and I believe it's attributable to a lack of leadership.
You know, I want to ask about what you want. Look, you have more power as governor here in this state than most governors have in our country as far as the budget and spending goes. There are some lawmakers who are saying this morning they had no idea. Even Democrats who should have been on your side had no idea what you were for and what you were against. Will that be made more clear before we go into this special session?
Oh, look, I don't know how anybody can say that. I've been very clear since, last August. I want to fix the fiscal cliff defined by the drop-off in State General Fund forecasted from this year to next year. That's $994 million. I am very flexible as to how we do it, but not whether we do it. And my job as governor is to try to push people towards the center, whether I'm pushing Republicans from right to left or Democrats left to right. If we don't get enough people in the center to embrace a common approach, you never get the votes necessary to pass anything. And so that's what I'm doing. And for example, I hate the fifth penny. But I am willing to keep some part of it to solve the cliff, so long as the rest of the revenue that solves the cliff is reform. In terms of using those things that were recommended by the task force that studied and made recommendations on how we should reform our tax structure. But it needs to be permanent. It needs to be add fairness and stability and predictability, and it needs to fully solve the cliff. And so I have a tremendous amount of flexibility as to how we do it, but not whether we do it. And anytime you are pushing legislators to do what they don't want to do, there's always a little bit of friction that develops. I mean, that's just inevitable. But at the end of the day, we're only going to get this done by compromise. And compromise, by definition, means you get some things you want in exchange for some things you don't want.
Right.
And that's the hard part for legislators. Everybody wants to get only what they want, and you just can't do it. You start to look like Congress if that's what you demand.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. When the Republicans were holding their ground and the Black Caucus was then holding their ground, and neither side said we're not going to compromise with the other, that we're just not going to do it, why didn't you jump in at that point and shake it up and find a way to do it? Because a lot of people feel like you have the power to be able to do that.
Well, first of all, you got to understand that the legislators in the House of Representatives, they developed a lot of animosity and mistrust over the course of this session. That was not easily dispelled. I will tell you that there were plenty of votes in the House to pass revenue measures, but those measures were tied to things that there weren't votes for. And anytime you have to have a two-thirds vote, it's incumbent upon the Speaker to work that process and figure out how to move those instruments. He refused to do that. For example, had those amendments been taken off of the revenue bills, I am absolutely convinced there was more than enough votes to pass those bills and get them over to the Senate. And for weeks he was told, if you leave those amendments on, we cannot vote for them because those things were repugnant and offensive to so many members of the House. And they weren't necessary. First of all, I think they cause a dual object problem, which could threaten the viability of all of the instruments. But secondly, the bills they were tied to had already passed the House. They were in the Senate. They didn't need to be tied anymore. So I will tell you, we are working. In fact, I've got legislators in my office right now. We are already working to try to fix the problems that seem to plague the legislature so that we can move things forward. Because, this is just unacceptable. It is unacceptable that for 2 years in a row, the House has failed to pass a single bill to address a cliff that they've known was coming because they created the cliff back in 2016, and they have yet to do anything to address it. And the people of Louisiana deserve and demand better.
Okay, we've only got 60 seconds left because I promised I would keep it down and not run over. So I want to ask you, though, you got to get back in there, I'm assuming, and talk to Taylor Bauer. So how is that going to go?
Well, it's going to go well. Look, Taylor is a good person. I've known him for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. He is. He's a good man.
And he and I have a decent personal relationship. He's the speaker. I'm going to work with him. But we have to do better. And quite frankly, he has to do a better job. If you just look at the House of Representatives and how it conducted its business over the last couple of weeks, you just have to conclude that there are real problems in House leadership. In terms of just go look at the votes, go look at who was present, who was absent, who voted for what, and you can't get a sense that there's strong leadership there trying to deliver on the call that he asked for. I gave him every item that he asked for. He is the speaker. He's got 60 Republican votes there, and plenty of Democrats willing to cross over and help him. He just has to work the process.
Governor John Bel Edwards has been with us. Sir, thank you for your time this morning. We do appreciate it, especially just giving us the one-on-one. We do appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Anytime.